Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, January 26th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game is in 219 days. The game against Michigan in 303 days. We talk about college football a lot on this show, obviously with an audience of Ohio State fans, which means we're talking a lot about generally pretty good college football. Today, I want to take things in a whole different direction. I want to talk about the other half of the sport, why bad college football is actually kind of a beautiful thing too. And I thought, who could I have on to talk about this? And I thought, I know just the guy. His name is Ryan Nanni. He is the host, one of the hosts of the Shutdown Fullcast, which is simultaneously the internet's only college football podcast and generally only slightly college football adjacent.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, you may know him also as Celebrity Hot Tub on Twitter. Ryan, first of all, will you please explain the very noble goal you set for the year 2023 and how this appearance is just a very small part of it?
Sure. Because I'm a stupid man with stupid dreams, I decided that I wanted to spend 2023 guesting on as many podcasts as possible. Whether or not I'm qualified to be on them, Tom graciously reached out and said, hey, I'm willing to let you spew your stupidity for a limited duration, and here I am.
Here you are, and you know, you guys talk a good bit of college football on the show. You know, it gets a little college football adjacent at times, but
yeah,
you know, you seem to enjoy rolling around in the mess of college football in a way that I kind of enjoy. One of my like dirty little secrets is just, you know, it's like the 50 Shades of Grey meme where it's like my tastes are you know, my desires are unconventional and it's show me, and then the fourth panel is just like the box score from the 2008 Sun Bowl or something. I wanted to talk just about what is it about college football that where the bad games are entertaining in a way. When you're watching a bad MLB game or a bad NFL game, it's just like, oh, this is awful. And when you're watching a bad college football game, somehow there's something about it that just makes it just like wildly entertaining. What is it about college football that brings that out?
I think college football is prone to overreaction in every direction. So everything always feels like it means the most because that's sort of how the sport's been built up. You know, an NFL team, a really good NFL team, can lose 3 or 4 games a year, and they can look terrible in those 3 or 4 games, but it doesn't really matter. Nobody's going to freak out about it. Baseball, I mean, you've just taken that problem and multiplied it by 20. But college football still has enough of that sense of urgency where, like, not only does every game matter in terms of you need to win as many of them as you can, it's important that you also feel good about the wins and you feel like confident about they all mean a ton about the program's direction. There's not a lot of room to really say like, oh, well, you know, everybody has an off week. Nobody says that in college football. Everybody freaks out. It's great.
Yeah, and you know, again, this is an audience mostly of Ohio State fans, where you know the wins are generally what didn't go right, and the losses are here's why the world is going to end the next 24 hours. So,
correct.
You know, but they are not the only team that plays those games. I have kind of like a Rolodex of terrible college football games that, you know, I mean, the 2002 Ohio State played just a sequence of terrible football games and won the national championship. That's kind of like the apex of this kind of genre, but.
Yeah,
there are a bunch of really, really bad games, just unwatchable garbage. And sometimes it's, you know, there was a 5-0 Michigan Purdue game in the, you know, like snowing sideways kind of in probably 1995 or so. Do you have a favorite of this genre, or, you know, a favorite game or two?
This is a tough one. The infamous Cheez-It Bowl between, I want to say that's TCU and Cal, if memory serves correctly. Yes. And this is confusing because the Cheez-It Bowl has now moved to like 3 other bowls by now. But just like rife with turnovers and weird injuries and complete like failure stacked upon failure. That's probably like a real pinnacle of the form, in part because it was a bowl game. Like a regular season sloppy game, sometimes you can chalk up to it's a long season, you know, travel is hard, preparation is difficult, whatever. When you do it in a bowl game, when it's the end of the season for you, and both teams combined for that, like that was pretty special. That was pretty delightful.
One of my favorite bowls, I mentioned it earlier, the 2008 Sun Bowl, where Oregon State beat Pitt 3-0, and Oregon State kicked the field goal with like 2 minutes left in the second quarter. So it wasn't even like it was a dramatic field goal. It was just, here's a field goal. And that was it. That was the extent of the excitement for the day.
Here's what we hope will be the start of nope, that's it. And I think that's a LaShawn McCoy Pitt team as well.
I think that might have been, that was the year after they ruined West Virginia's season. So,
yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
One of the other good ones is the Frank Beamer, like the incredible indelible image of Frank Beamer with his arms over his head with the score graphic 0-0 end of regulation in 2014. The best part of that was Virginia Tech lost that game 6-3 in overtime. And Wake Forest scored 2 field goals in overtime. Their drives, 4 plays, 0 yards, 4 plays, 4 yards. Just masterful.
But somebody had to win. Somebody had to win.
That's the beauty of college football. Yeah, Penn State's been in a part of a few of these two.
Sure.
Were you watching the Illinois Penn State 9 overtime game last year?
So no, that's one of the ones that for whatever reason I had an obligation and I just looked at my phone and I saw the final score and I was like, oh, that's weird. And then I looked at how we got the final score and I was like, delightful. Perfect. No notes.
Ohio State was playing at Indiana that week. So we're all sitting in the hotel room. We're like, well, we got to watch the end of this game. But then we got plenty of time to get over to the stadium to go cover the game. And it just keeps dragging on. And we're like looking at our watches like, well, we can't leave now. This is history. So
yes, this is it. I mean, you're not wrong. This is the important thing to remember. Not all history is good. Not all history is fun.
Yeah, that was one where it was like, man, this is an absolute work of art. And one that I didn't see, but that has lived forever, another Penn State one, Iowa 6, Penn State 4. Those are two teams that kind of have a way to roll around in it. I've seen you talk about 11ers and, the weird college football scores. Man, ending up with 4 points that's like worse than ending up with 0.
It's pretty hard. I mean, this year we got the what my co-host Jason Kirk dubbed the Iowa touchdown, which I believe is 2 safeties and a field goal. And it's really just, I think part of it is that why it's not as enjoyable at the pro level in football specifically is that in the modern era, teams are too good for things to really roll that out of control in both directions. You can find there's an infamous, I think it's a Rams Giants game from '84 where one team got 3 safeties against it in one quarter. The goalposts fell over at one point. The NFL has sort of smoothed out the edges and gotten good enough and deep enough that you don't see that anymore. But college football, because it's a bunch of 19 and 20-year-olds who are still figuring out how to play at a high level sometimes, and because the depth of talent is not what it is at the NFL, it can, when things come together just the right way, and when people are all having a bad day at the same time, you can get some really weird shit. Yeah,
you get the emotional maturity of 19 to 22-year-olds, and stuff can spiral pretty quickly.
Yes.
I will make the counterpoint to your NFL point. The Jets, they are still a team, so
yes. But it's hard for the Jets to get trapped in that game where the other team is being the Jets as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now that the Bills are good, now that the Dolphins are kind of good, the opportunities are fewer and farther between. Yes, you still can get them, but the Jets are a little bit. I mean, I guess if we can just get the Jets and Colts to play every year, maybe we'll get some magic out of that.
Jets, Texans, schedule it. Get him on the schedule. Play him at Mercedes-Benz in some kind of a kickoff classic. Let's make it happen. It is kind of like the Jets are one of those teams where it's sort of objectively funny when they're bad. And there are teams in college football where you hear people say college football is better when this team is good.
Yeah.
I think there's a bunch of teams where it's better when college football is better when some of these teams are bad. And you are a Florida graduate, so I'm sure you will not disagree with the number one choice I have. Man, it is funny when Miami is bad.
It is. I mean, it is both funny and I am worried that we are running out of runway on it because Miami, it's not that they've been bad for a long time, but they haven't been great in a long time. And we're sort of settling into oh no, is this just what's happening here? That said, Miami is one of the worst equipped fan bases to deal with being bad because they were so good for so long, and they even when they were quote unquote bad, they were still beating Florida State, or they were still contending for top 15 rankings or whatever. And the bottom has fallen out in a really, really unpleasant way now. But I think that's a really solid pick. Yeah.
Do you have another one that jumps out to you that, as you know, this is watching this team struggle makes my Saturdays just slightly more enjoyable?
I will say, for the good of the nation, any sort of marquee SEC team, and I'll include Florida in that. Like, basically, if you're going to say, who are the SEC teams that have won or contended for a national title in the last 20 years, anytime they have a bad season, I think that's enjoyable. Alabama goes on this list, even though they don't, like, this was a bad season for Alabama. Georgia goes on this list, even though they don't seem to do it anymore. But, like, Auburn's a perfect example. Auburn is an extremely successful football program if you zoom way, way out. The minute you get close, you're like, oh, this is a mess. And I think that's what makes an SEC Titan having a bad year so enjoyable, is you get to see sort of all the associated discomfort and mania that goes with it that doesn't always follow at other places.
Yeah, no one does discomfort and mania quite like Auburn does. They occupy a unique tier of the sport.
Yeah.
On that front, I think that maybe this goes back to one of the first things you said, which is the tiny nature of the schedule and the focus on every individual game. Like, this is the flip side of the "it just means more" campaign that the SEC ran a few years ago.
Yes.
It's like, it just means more. So when it's not going bad, man, it really means bad things.
It really sticks in your craw. Yeah.
And Auburn has this way of turning what's like a perfectly decent season into like, okay, well, we got to fire the coach. Well, we just did that. We're still paying the last two buyouts, right, and now we got to do the next one. Is that a function of something specific at Auburn, or is that just Nick Saban driving everyone at Auburn insane?
I think it is amplified by the Nick Saban thing. I think Auburn has a unique, and I'll use that generously, booster culture that causes a lot of internal dissent and backfighting. And so there's always an opportunity for somebody to be like, aha, I told you 5 years ago, he's an asshole and we were right. So I don't think there's like a lot of consistent unity from the people who, make the program go from a dollar's perspective. But like, Tennessee is not wildly different from this. LSU is not wildly different from this. Honestly, Florida at this point, like, Florida has churned through so many coaches since Urban Meyer that it's sort of like there is a pretty good band of non-Bama Georgia teams that you're sort of like, oh, none of you are that different. You all want to think you are, and you all want to point at each other and be like, boy, at least we're got it more together than those idiots, but that's not true.
The other thing that I love is when you can see a team, you can see that dysfunctional season coming, but the other, the fans of that team can't necessarily see it. So it's like you get those hype train summers,
yes,
where it's like, oh baby, we're going to be, it's like, are you? Because your offensive line's still not particularly good. That feels like that's going to be important. It's like, we got our quarterback. Like, all right, cool. But, and there are some programs that are just like fantastic, just legendary for like, Florida State is like unconquered in May. Like that is maybe my favorite example where it's like, oh man, the Noles are back, baby. The U is back.
Yeah.
USC is back.
Texas, obviously.
Texas
example.
Is back. Yes.
Texas, and now Texas A&M has sort of joined them in that category. Yeah.
Do you feel like this coming season, do you feel like we're in for a summer of fill in the blank is back that is definitely going to fall on its face as soon as the season starts?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, there's going to be a lot of positive heat around Texas, but Texas also like lost some close games, and I think like maybe will actually maintain its hype relative to form. USC, I think, is going to be the interesting one. You bring a Heisman winner back, and you still sort of have the coaching staff that you have the pedigree that you have, et cetera, et cetera. But now it's like, okay, there are very clear expectations at this point. Like, you cannot be getting stomped by Utah in the Pac-12 championship game. Even USC, it's easy to forget now, but USC was one game away from getting in the playoff. And within that, and this happens to a lot of playoff teams, so it's not just on USC, but within that, we were a lot of close games where it's like, wow, didn't look great against Oregon State, didn't look great against Cal for long stretches. So I think USC still has an element of like, I think they can get got. I don't know if they will get got, but I think they can.
One team that might kind of encapsulate both of the last two things we were talking about is Tennessee, were they coming off the, hey man, they beat Alabama, and boy, if only Hendon Hooker hadn't gotten hurt, and you have that. Plus, you have it's kind of funny when Tennessee's bad, because Tennessee is very intense, and the program has just not been at that level for quite a while.
Yeah,
are they a team that you think could be that type of lots of hype in May, and then it ends up being another like angry, frustrating season?
It could be. That could be the case. Joe Milton looked really good in the bowl game, and I think it's really going to turn on if Joe Milton is good or not, which a lot of Michigan fans will say, like, good luck. That's going to be a lot of fun for you. I think what helps Tennessee is when you play in the same division as Georgia, that sort of acts as a restrictor on the whole thing. So everybody's like, yeah, Tennessee might be good, but we're still not going to pick them to win the division. We're just not going to do that. I think the program that maybe feels this way, or now that, that this has triggered something, I don't know why, Penn State is really interesting to me, because it feels like everybody is sort of looking and saying, okay, for various reasons, this has become, if it's going to happen for Penn State, it's got to be this year. Like, that's what it's all built towards. Had a great Rose Bowl, have a young quarterback that everybody's been very excited about for like a year and a half, if not longer at this point. And it feels like that is bubbling to and James Franklin is good at this too. James Franklin wants to court that kind of hype. That said, Penn State does not have a stellar record of taking those kind of expectations, at least under James Franklin, and manifesting them into we had a kick-ass season.
Yeah, I think it was 2-15 against top 10 teams at Penn State, something like that. I mean, it's like they get to a certain point and they're like right there, and the elevator stops there, and you gotta change elevator banks if you want to get higher than that at Penn State. Right. But it does. I think there's a chance this really is their year, because it's like the offensive line has been holding them back for so many years. I'm thinking I might do a show with a Penn State writer soon, because this has been my working theory for a few weeks now as I'm looking at them. The line is better. It feels like Sean Clifford was kind of their version of JT Barrett, where it's like he's really good, really steady, there for
super competent,
super competent, gets you to that Rose Bowl level, conference champion, adjacent kind of level, but just, there's a ceiling there. And, sometimes the next guy is Ryan Mallett at Michigan, and sometimes the next guy is Dwayne Haskins at Ohio State, or Justin Fields at Ohio State, or Trevor Lawrence at Clemson, whatever it is.
Right.
It feels like that this could be their year, but they're a very interesting team to me, and I might be talking myself into being one of the marks who's like super all in on Penn State in May. I mean, that is going to be the trendy oh, this is a team on the rise pick, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if it doesn't work out, the flip side of that is now the pendulum swings back even harder. If Penn State loses 2 games in the regular season and they don't win, and they don't make it to the Big Ten championship game, and they don't, it's not just that Penn State loses these games, it's that, this, frequently you're like, yeah, it was a 10-point game, but it never felt like that. It never felt like Penn State was really going to go out there and grab the thing by the throat. It always just sort of felt like they were sprinting as hard as they could to keep up with someone who was jogging. Yeah, and or they have the game where they're up by 8 points, 9 points with 5 minutes left, and somehow lose, and it's
right.
They just find a way to not quite make it happen. It does have to happen probably at some point, but no, we'll see if it's this year. Just before I let you go, do you have a number of shows you were hoping to get on this year, and where are you right now? Okay, so I believe it's either show 11 or 12. And so I am roughly on pace. Let's just say this is all I do I have 2 more that I'm doing in January. So let's call it 14 for simplicity's sake. That puts me on pace to be just over 150 for the year, which the more I say that, the more I'm like, oh, my family's not going to be happy about this at all. They're going to be like, you did what? Why did you do this? So I think like any good marathon, I'm going to have to figure out how to pace myself and sort of say all right, man, you're going to have to figure out that stretch where it's like, hey, we're doing 4 shows. But Tom, you caught me when I'm full of energy and way in over my head.
So I'm just all saying yes. That said, if anybody email me, ryan.nanny@gmail.com. I'll come on your show. I've had somebody who's like, I run a banking podcast and I don't really know what we would talk about, but I'm like, yeah, I'll come do it. Whatever.
Yeah, have you listened to my actual show? Like, believe
me, exactly. I don't know what I'm talking about there either. It's not a big deal.
I was just listening to the episode that dropped this morning while I was out shoveling snow, and they're explaining college football in the context of Warhammer 40K, which I was not. I am only aware of Warhammer 40K via the Shutdown Fullcast.
Same.
Well, if you Ryan, let people know where they can find you on Twitter.
Sure.
Shutdown Fullcast. Anything else you'd like to plug here?
No, thank you. This is, I think this is the first Ohio State podcast I've ever been on. Been perfectly pleasant. I apologize for everything my co-hosts say about Ohio State. They're, bitter fake Michigan grads, and I love the Buckeyes, and I will defend them to the death.
All right. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you all for joining us today. We'll talk to you tomorrow.